And so this evening, we're going to take a look at Thailand's 20th constitution, which is in its draft form at the moment. It's got 279 articles. We're not sure actually if it's finalised, but our panelists will be able to give you a much better idea of that than me. And it's actually, technically, if you think about it, it's Thailand's 21st constitution, because one draft was stillborn, and Kun Jade will be telling us about that. We're very pleased to be having this programme tonight because there's obviously concern about the sensitive subject, and we're grateful to the authorities for letting us go ahead with it. And I think it's a very healthy sign that things are lightening up a little bit and we can have sensible debates on important topics. This evening we have Pongthep Thepkanjana, who last held office as a Deputy Prime Minister under Yingluck. He has a very distinguished career as a judge behind him. He was a member of the Puea Thai government. He's been a Minister of Justice, Energy, Minister of the Prime Minister's Office, and he was a Deputy Leader of Thairak Thai, so we're extremely pleased to have him here. We also have sitting on his right Kasit Piromya, who is a very senior member of the Democrat Party. He's a former career diplomat. He was the ambassador to Washington, and during Apizit Vajijiva's government, he was the foreign minister, and he had a lot to do with the Foreign Correspondents Club. He also has the distinction of being a speaker at Suvarnabhumi Airport in 2010 during the Yellow Shirt occupation, but he might like to forget that. Welcome. And finally, we have Dr. Jade Donavanik, who is the Dean of the Faculty of Law at Durakit Pandit University in Bangkok. He is a member of the CDC, the Constitution Drafting Committee. He's worked on both drafts with the Bhawan draft that was nixed, and he's going to tell us a lot about that. And he was basically assigned to come here tonight, which is a good thing. And so he's delighted to be with us. So Kunjay, can you give us the background about the latest two drafts and what's been going on and where you think we are now?
Well, as Dominic was telling all of you, that I'm delighted to be here with all of you tonight. In talking about the Constitution, actually I was the member of the Bhawan CDC, or Constitutional Drafting Committee, and I'm the advisor to this current CDC head by Ajahn Mishai. So I was just keeping myself to the current draft because, as you all know, the Bhawan draft has been turned down by the National Reform Council. So the National Reform Council turned down that draft with 135 to 105. So unless asked in particular about the provisions of that draft, then I will talk about it, because that is also a very long draft. This one here before us is not so short, however shorter than the Bhawan draft. I will compare this draft to the 1997 and the 2007 draft, and the reason in which the changes were brought through this current draft. You all might have heard, or you might have still remembered, that during each and many of the rallies or the walk on the road that you've seen, many people were talking about Article 7 of the Constitution. A lot of them direct Article 7 to His Majesty the King, as that is the prerogative of the King. Since it was said that if there is no provision of the Constitution, then the tradition of the democracy, which has the monarchy, a constitutional monarchy, shall be used in lieu. But no one knows what tradition it means. And many people were asking every time that they did not want the Prime Minister, especially the elected Prime Minister, to stay on, that there shall be a use of Article 7 and there shall be an appointment by the King of a Prime Minister. That has been long a problem ever since the 1997 Constitution. The 2007 Constitution still had the exact same article as Article 7. So this current draft make it clear that this issue will not go to His Majesty the King. It's not the King's prerogative, as people thought. It is up to a panel, which consisting of the President of the Constitutional Court, the Chief Justice of the Court, of the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of the Administrative Court, and all the heads of the autonomous body, the independent organizations. These people will sit together with the Prime Minister as well as the heads of the two, the head of the Senate and the head of the House, in order to discuss the issues of what should be used. So now it's clear. You don't have to talk about Article 7 because now it's not Article 7 as well. The next issue is on the electoral system. As you look back to the 1997-2007 Constitution, the electoral system is one that we call the MMM, the mixed member majoritarian, or the simple way to call it is the parallel system. The parallel system gives you one vote for the constituency, the other vote for the party list, and these two are counted separately. The draft here before us put all the votes together, and the counting would not be MMM. It will not be the two counting separately, but there will be only one count and also one ballot, one cross. You pick a person in the constituency, and that person also represent the party. The reason that the Constitutional Drafting Committee was using this system is because when you look back to the parallel system, when people come to elect the constituency, they elect a person without thinking about the party that that person is a member of, as much as who the person is. When they elect a party, they did not think of the members of that party, whether or not the members of that party are good or are suitable to be their MPs or not. Because of course the list is very long. You can go look of all the party lists. The reason that an election should come only with a one take is because in a good party there shall be good candidates. A good candidate shall represent a good party. The numbers of vote, it doesn't matter that you get 2, 3, 4, 5 or 10 votes. Or if you want to use the system that you can make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 10, 20 votes, it's fine. If you think the electorate or the legitimate voters will be sophisticated enough to elect, for example, like the Australian system or some of the European system that you can even write the name. If you want to use that, then it's fine. But if you're not thinking about how many times you can make your votes, then you have to think of a system in which people will get the best out of it. And each and every vote count. If you look back to the parallel system, not each and every vote count, especially from the constituencies. Only the person who gains the highest number of votes in the constituency will become the MP. All the other votes within each of the constituency were thrown away, or we say it's all sinking in the river. The votes in the party list did not actually recurring to the constituency because people were just thinking, okay, I want this party and I want this candidate. If you have only one vote, you have to think and think before you cast your vote, because the party is represented by the candidate and the candidate represents the party. And every single vote in a constituency will not be thrown away anywhere. It will be calculated the second time for the party members. Therefore, the parties will have to work in close relation with each of the candidate, and each of the candidate will have to work closely with the party. And that is why the system, which is called MMA, mixed member apportionment, is used. If you want to find out where does it come from, then perhaps you will have to look into a country, for example, like Mexico, a country like Denmark, or if you look in Germany, you can look in an area called Baden-Württemberg of the German, of Germany. If you want to compare the system with another 9 countries, you can compare it to mixed member proportional, which is the system used in the main part of Germany and in many other countries. Okay. So that's where the electoral system comes from. For the Senate, you think of the 1997 Constitution, which gives full election of the Senate to people. And you probably land into a system in which this might be called most democratic in a way. But if you look at democracy in which election might matter but not matter the most, it's how much voice of the people that can be said through their representatives. The representatives may come by many types of systems. It doesn't have to be direct election. But of course, it must be one that can be said that the people were the electorate or the people were the delegate. Somehow, you can't make a system in which a person is picked by a panel or a person is picked by appointment of another person. That might be said as undemocratic. If you look to the 1997, of course you might say, well, full election, that's highly democracy. But perhaps if you look in many other countries, why they don't all use election for the House of Senate? You probably have all the reasons, which I will not go through the reason. But when it comes to the Constitution of 2007, half of this panel were elected. The other half were appointed by a panel of 7 people, and that was highly criticized for a clear reason that we all know. So in this current draft, a system of indirect election is introduced to this country. The system mainly direct at all the people who will be able to become a senator. Every one of them join in each of the group, which basically the CDC was thinking of making about 20 groups, which encompass all walk of life. For example, doctors, nurses, lawyers, accountants, and whichever name you can think of, then they will be separate in all these 20 groups. Each and every one of the Thai citizen who would want to become a senator can apply, can be a candidate within the level of their, we call it the ampere, okay, the district level. Okay. From, not the district, excuse me, the municipal level, okay, ampere. Then from the municipal level, whoever became the chosen ones of the municipal level will come up to the provincial level. From the provincial level, they will come to the national level. And in this end, you will get 200 senators, which were indirectly elected. Because when a normal situation happened, when we are talking about group, we normally put people in the same group and make the people in the same group select themselves or elect among themselves. The CDC was thinking that if you make them elect themselves among themselves, they probably know each other, they probably group together, they probably lobby, they probably do many such things that people don't like. Therefore, each of the group will not be electing their own group, but will be electing other groups. So each of the candidates will have 19 ballots in their hands. They will be electing someone else in the other groups, from the municipal level to the provincial level and the national level. In this sense, people were choosing among themselves who should become the senators, and this is totally different from the other house, which is the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives, the reason that it is called House of Representatives, because the way in which the representation is made is representative representation. That means you choose among no one that you are a group of. You choose from anybody who said they can be your representative. But in a system which is indirect election, it's a delegative representation. You choose among ones that you know what this person can do and what he or she has been doing. For example, this person is a lawyer, this person is a doctor, this person is an accountant. The reason that you will choose them is because you know what's their profession, what they do, what they work on, and what can they be doing for you as a senator to be checking and balancing with the representative in the House of Representatives. Therefore, this system was introduced. The last two that I wanted to touch on is the autonomous body, that you call it the independent organizations. The independent organization has been seen in this country, especially after the 2007 Constitution, as the fourth power. So in this current draft, the Constitutional Drafting Committee tried to ensure that it will no longer be seen as the fourth power, but it will be seen as a working tools to help check and balance between the three powers, which is the judicial system, the administrative, and the legislative, which all along, when they work together, in some system, for example, you take the a clear separation of power system, they normally work as a checking and balancing tools against each other. And if they can work well, then that's fine. But in a system in which they do not work well in that sense, then you need to have some of the helping tools, and the independent organization is the helping tools. We still keep the same independent organizations with some of the reduction of the powers to some of them, some of the increase in powers for some of them. So if you want to ask about the autonomous body or the independent organization, you can check with the 1997 and 2007 Constitution. It's not that much different. The difference brought to the independent organizations for this current draft is that some of them were in, they had a term of 5 years all the way up to 9 years, but now they all have the terms of 7 years. Okay. Some of them will change in numbers and in some of the work that they will be doing. Other than that, they remain pretty much the same as the 1997-2007 Constitution. The last one is on the Constitutional Court. The problem of the Constitutional Court so far is that people look at the Constitutional Court in two different ways and pretty much mistakenly about the Constitutional Court. In one way, they thought of the Constitutional Court as an independent organization, which the Constitutional Court throughout the world, as well as in Thailand, is not an independent organization. But it didn't mean that the Constitutional Court is not independent. It is independent, but it is not an independent organization in a sense of the other organization, for example, the National Anti-Corruption, the Election Commission. They're not that. The second one is that people were thinking of the Constitutional Court as a political court, a court for politicians or a court for politics, which is not. A constitutional court, the name is very clear that it is constitutional court and it works just for the constitution. In every other country that has the constitutional court, or in those countries that use the regular court, especially the Supreme Court, to decide the issue of the constitution, they all deal with constitution. The reason that people thought the constitutional court is a political court is because within the constitution, as I already said, there is an electoral system, there is a senator, there's things about the judicial system, there are things about the administrative system, there are things about the legislative system. These all can be said as involving politics. Therefore, a court which would touch on or would rule on the constitution is inevitably having to say things that will cross by political arena. And that is why people will mistakenly talk about the court, this constitutional court, as a political court. So this draft makes sure that people understand that the constitutional court is a constitutional court and works on constitution, especially on interpretation of the constitution. And within that power of interpretation of the constitution, when it comes to constitution, people will not stand up and say why the constitutional court is talking about the constitution, because it is a constitutional court, therefore it talks about the constitution. It might seem to be blunt, it might seem to be very straightforward, or even in a very unintelligent way to say that a constitutional court is a constitutional court, but that it is. And if you can make it clear that the constitutional court is a constitutional court, and it talks about constitution, and it has everything to do with the constitution, and anything about the constitution is up to the constitutional court, then you will understand why the constitutional court talk about every single thing, every single provision in the constitution, whatever that provision is, because it is the constitutional court. This current draft makes it clear, and I've said many times. So those are the other things. In the end, people might think about amendment to the Constitution. Amendment to the Constitution should not be too simple, but should not be too hard. However, all the representatives should not be the final say of amendment of the Constitution, especially a Constitution in which a referendum was made to it and the Constitution was passed through referendum. All the important provisions of the Constitution will have to go through referendum before it can enter into force. So that's the only main change that you would see from the amendment. Other than that, the voting of the amendment doesn't make any much different from the past. But on the points that the important issues, the important provisions of the Constitution will have to go through referendum before it can enter into force, that is new. But is this something that is invented by this current CDC? Of course not. Many countries, and perhaps many of us here come from lots of European countries, you all use the same thing. That if you want to pass something important to the Constitution, then you pass it through the referendum. Unless you do it like the American Constitution, which is one of the hardest to be amended, because you have to go through the House, you have to go through the Senate, and you have to go through a ratification by 3/4 of all the other states, which of course 50 states. You get 3/4 of the 50 states in each of the amendment, and then you're good enough to get the amendment passed. And of course, you know how long the Constitution in that country has been written and how many revisions made to it. So this CDC is not making it too hard, not making it too easy, but making it principally right and principally correct in order to amend the Constitution. So those are the things that I have to briefly explain about this current draft Constitution.
Okay, I'm going to call a halt there. Thank you very much. So Kun Kasit was elected under the 2007 Constitution, which is the one that replaced the 1997 one. And that was the first constitution in Thailand that was adopted by referendum. So that was a step in the right direction. Kun Kasit, what are your thoughts on constitutions? Easy question.
Thank you. I am speaking this in my personal capacity, although I'm being sent by the Democrat Party. We are still not allowed to hold meetings and so on. I find this draft constitution illiberal one. It's a setback for the progression of the democratization process of Thailand. The present draft constitution is about to give Thailand a guided or controlled democracy or democratic processes. And I have been asking myself why the wise men of the drafting committee led by Kun Mi Chai and the military power behind wants to have this such a illiberal piece of constitution. What is the intention and the spirit behind this piece of illiberal document? I try to analyze and ask myself questions, and I have come to the conclusion that the military authorities and some of the conservative bureaucrats, intellectuals and academicians would like to see more stability in the political life of the Thai kingdom than a more robust expression of differences inside the parliament or on the street or through the media. So the objective of the main objective of the constitution is to provide a stable situation in Thailand as much as possible. And how to obtain that stability is definitely not through the interplays of political parties and civil societies and the media and so on, but to put reliance on the bureaucrats, both civilian, military, including the police. So it is more or less a constitution that will provide a bureaucratic-led type of democratic polity. And on top of that, inside the constitution itself, there are at least 3 main chapters that provide a very strong bureaucratic-led democracy. One is the state responsibilities, what the state must do. Second is the state policies. And third, the presence of the nominated Senate with a guaranteed 6 seats for the military establishment. And on top of that, a 20-year strategy program. So whichever governments that come into power after the elections will be subjected to all of these sort of straitjacket types of mandatory activities. Very unlikely that they will have the power to put their own policy into practice, because there will be the state policies, state obligations, and 20 years of strategy, national plan, and so on. And all of these activities will be done more or less by the bureaucracy and not by the political players, politicians, the cabinet or the parliament. It makes the constitution very illiberal. It will make Thailand progress through political life in a very much controlled manner. So why do they want to have this bureaucratic-led political polity? Maybe fundamentally, the military establishment believe that they are the only sole protector of the nation, the religion, and the institution of the monarchy. It's their divine duty to ensure that the kingdom move in a stable manner, and also to avoid further military intervention through the coup d'etats, because they will be sitting tight in the upper house in the Senate and have all the bureaucrats to undertake all the state obligations and the state policies. So I think it is the question of ideology or belief that it's better for Thailand to have a sort of a controlled democratic polity rather than a robust participatory politics. So in that sense, I find this draft constitution unacceptable. Dr. Jade has kindly pointed out the goodies of some of the provisions and the spirit of the constitution. But I think one has to look at the contents of the constitution in a holistic manner overall. Kun Apisit Vechachiva even said that there are some good points in the constitutions, but there are more bad points. I don't delve into the good and the bad, but I look at the overall spirit and the intention of the constitution itself, and I have come to the conclusion that it would be unacceptable. And why unacceptable? Because for the past 2 decades, Thailand has come quite far in terms of participation, in terms of decentralization, in terms of political awareness about the duties, about the rights, and so on. And suddenly you have this piece of document that would arrest the furtherance of participation and consultation among the Thai populace. And in the constitution, you will find that there is no more decentralization of Thailand. Not a word is being mentioned about the need to have elected governors of the 76 provinces of Thailand. We only have one province that is elected, namely Bangkok, with Mom Ratchabong Sukhumpan Boripat. But the rest of the provinces are being ruled by the senior bureaucrats from the Ministry of Interior. And the past 10 years, the request and the rallies on the street was about, one of the main aim was about decentralization. The furtherance of participation by the people in the rural areas. We have elected provincial council, municipalities and villages, but we still have not the elected governors of all the provinces of Thailand. And somehow this present draft constitution simply ignores the need for the further move on the decentralization process of Thailand, with clear-cut division of labor between the central government in Bangkok and the local governments in all the provinces, right down to the various municipalities and villages. And with that guided democracy, I only foresee more troubles for the Thai political life into the future, because there will be incessant demands for more participation in the Thai politics. But suddenly it could be arrested by this present draft constitution. At the same time, there is a public outcry for the reform of Thai bureaucracy and the judicial system, especially the police department, that is fully being ignored. And there has not been any action for the past 2 years by the military authorities. So beside this control type of constitution, the demands and the requests of the people for more reform, drastic reform, is somehow being at the moment forgotten or not being pushed to the furthest result for the benefit of the country as a whole. So I only have this to say this evening, that I find the draft constitution illiberal, unacceptable. It will provide more difficulties for the Thai people into the future. I could not accept the reason that we should have the stability factor and ignoring the participatory politics with all the protests and so on. But I think that is part of the democratic life, which one has to live with it in order that the people can participate more and more in the political process and in the political decision making. Thank you.
Thank you. So after that rather gloomier assessment, Kun Pongthep, do you share similar gloom from the other side of the political table?
Thank you, Dominic. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be here with my dear colleagues and some of the military officials who will always be here. First, as I have experience in several branches of government, I started my career in the judiciary, then moved to politics as an MP, and then to the executive as Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. I have experienced that in all branches of government, there are good and bad people. There are good and bad people. Not only bad politicians, definitely not. In the civil servants, there are some bad people. In business, there are some bad people. We have mixed. Not only politicians are bad. But I remember the word of Lord Acton. He said, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the people, anybody who has power, they may corrupt, they may not corrupt, or they may corrupt. So power does not only belong to politicians. Power belongs to other branches of government as well. I ask myself, who will be able to protect his or her own interest the best? I would say that must be the person, right? Kun Kasit can protect his own interest the best. I cannot protect his interest better than he. So I consider that the Thai people, 65 million, will be able to protect their interests the best. Not only a small group of people who may claim that they are good people and they can protect the interests of the whole population better than those people. I did not believe that. For this constitution, or any constitution, I think the most important element is separation of powers and checks and balance system. Whether all branches of government have good checks and balance system or not, check one another or not, balance or not. I read this draft charter and I conclude that we lack good checks and balance system. We have imbalance of power. I'm sorry to use this PowerPoint. I have another one, but it is not in PowerPoint format, so I use this old one. If you look at our system right now, we have the legislative, House of Representatives and the Senate. We have the executive as the cabinet. We have the judiciary, 3 courts. We can forget about the military court. Right? We have administrative court, court of justice, and constitutional court. Then we have independent organizations, 5 of them. If you look at the arrow, you can see the arrow which down from the court to the cabinet. The court can check the cabinet extensively. Why the cabinet can hardly check the court? The independent organizations also can check the cabinet extensively. Why the cabinet can hardly check the independent organizations? The cabinet and the House of Representatives, they have check and balances. The cabinet can dissolve the House. The House can bring no confidence motion against the cabinet. The cabinet cannot check the Senate. The cabinet cannot dissolve the Senate. The Senate can check the Constitutional Court because it has the power to approve who will be appointed justice of the Constitutional Court. The Senate has the power to check independent organizations because it approves members of independent organizations. The Senate can hardly check the Court of Justice. I think under the administrative court law, the Senate have the power to approve the president of the administrative court and justice of the administrative court. The Court of Justice can check independent organizations extensively. Independent organizations, only some of them can check the Court of Justice. Then Ajahn Jet said where the Senate came from, like from election among themselves, that will not happen. That won't happen. It will happen after 5 years has lapsed. It will happen after 5 years has lapsed. Unfortunately, most of the Thai constitution does not survive 5 years. It has shorter life than that. There's one constitution. We drafted it by the time I was born for about 9 years, and it had the life of less than that, less than the life of drafting. Okay, let's see where the Senate. There is this. Where the Senate come from? 250 senators handpicked by the NCPO. That's where they came from during the first 5 years. We have 6 ex-official chiefs of police and armed forces. We have selection committee, about 9 to 12 members. This committee select 400 candidates, and then the NCPO will give a final say who the 194 senators will be. Then we have applicants from various classified groups who will elect among themselves for 200 nominees. Again, NCPO will handpick 50 of them. So, if you are interested in becoming senators under this draft charter, if it passes the referendum, you know whom you have to please. The NCPO will pick up and then submit the name to His Majesty the King for appointment. So this Senate, I think one of important and dangerous power of the Senate is the approval of nominees for the positions of Constitutional Court justices and members of independent organizations. Because if you can control, if you or anybody can control the Senate, you can control Constitutional Court and independent organizations, because you will approve who will be justice there, who will be members of that organizations. And there is one provisional section. If Ajahn Jiet will help me check, because I don't want to state anything contrary to facts. I don't want to violate the section 61 of the referendum law. Okay. Under the constitution which he drafted, and he is trying to read, because even he could not remember all, right? How could he expect that I or anybody could remember all? Under a provisional clause, the present justices of the Constitutional Court and members of independent organizations, their continuance in office depends on the organic law, which will be drafted by the drafting committee and approved by the National Legislative Council. So it means that the status of the present justices of the Constitutional Court and all members of independent organizations is in the hand of the drafting committee. If they draft organic law that all of you are out, then they are out and will be selected under the new system. They can say that, okay, election commission out under election law, right? And they can say that the National Counter-Corruption Commission stay under the NCCC law. It depends on the hand. It depends in the hand of the drafting committee. They have to please Kun Michai and the members more. Let me comment on the election among themselves system. First, anybody who wants to become a senator, right, when they know that the vote will be voted by only the applicants, one thing that I can expect, and I have to alert Ajahn Jiet, that, for example, Kun Kasit is closing his eyes, he doesn't want to listen to me. For example, right, if I want to become a senator, right, instead of applying alone by myself, I may try to encourage Kun Kasit, who does not want to be senator at all. He wants to be the prime minister, right? I may try to ask him, to persuade him to please apply, so you can vote to me. You can vote for me. This is likely to happen. This is likely to happen. And among 65 million population, how many people are qualified to register as candidate? How many of them would bother to register? Very small number of people. So the Senate, of course, is not considered representative of the Thai population. And I think The drafting committee accepted this, so the Senate does not have power of impeachment. Under the 1997 Constitution and the 2007 Constitution, the Senate has the power to impeach the Prime Minister, impeach Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, impeach many high-ranking officials. But because I presume that the drafting committee understand that the Senate is not considered representative of the people, so they were deprived of impeachment power. And then the Thai people have no power of impeachment. So when we go back to the check and balance system, in the old time, we have power of impeachment belongs to the Senate, who can impeach the court, impeach the judges, impeach election commissioner. Now no more, no more. I don't think we have much time, and so let me go to another point. This is the election of the Prime Minister, but I don't think we have much time on that. So let's see the Constitution Amendment. Right. Of course, the Constitution should not be easily amended. I agree, totally agree. And Ajahn Jet also added that the Constitution should not be too hard to amend, especially when the Constitution passes a referendum. Right, I agree. On condition that the referendum is a free and fair referendum. That all people, all parties, all sides can criticize, can voice their opinions for or against the draft charter. I would totally agree. But even so, even the Constitution which passed the referendum, it must not be too hard to amend. Even this interim Constitution, it has been amended. I believe Kun Michai helped draft this interim Constitution. It has been amended in a short time. Even if you have superpower, you still need to amend the Constitution. Okay, let's see, if you want to amend the Constitution, what we have? First, you need support of the majority of 500 MPs and 250 senators. Ajahn Jet, please correct me if I am wrong. I could make mistake.
This system is also in the 1997-2007
Yes.
Constitution. Yeah.
At least, but at the time, 250 senators were not appointed. So you must get more than half, which means 376 from 750 parliamentarians. Not yet. You fall down too easy. You also need, this is not in any constitution, support of 20% or more of opposition MPs. Even if you get 700 votes, but you do not get 20% or more of opposition MP vote, you fail. Then you need support of 1/3 or more of senators. 1/3 or more of senators. Who appoint senators? I don't want to remind you on that. Then, if the amendment involves constitution amendment provisions, qualifications or prohibitions of politicians and key figures in the Constitutional Court and independent organizations, duties and powers of courts and independent organizations, or any matter which may make courts or independent organizations unable to carry out their duties. Very broad. You have to pass a referendum. Then, the last hurdle, in many cases, it may be reviewed by the Constitutional Court. I can hardly foresee any amendment which can pass the 5 hurdles. My time is up.
Yeah.
Okay. Understand. Thanks.
Right, we have a microphone somewhere in the room, so people who want to ask questions make themselves known to me. We have in the audience Pongthep Thepkanjana, who's a lecturer at the Faculty of Law, Thammasat University. He's a member of the Nitirat group, and he wasn't arrested. And he's a critic of the draft. Now, he was invited to join the panel, but said he was not prepared. But if you'd like to say something, please do. Is there a microphone? I can't see it. It's a very full room. So, Kun Pongthep, Ajahn Pongthep.
Thank you. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
It's okay. Okay. Thank you for the invitation. And I'm sorry because I did not prepare that I have to talk today. So maybe I will speak not clear or some grammatic fault. So I just heard some point that Dr. Jade and some Kun Pongthep and Kun Kasit have said about this draft constitution. So I will also talk about some comment that I have about my views on this draft constitution. So some point that Kun Kasit and Kun Pongthep may be missed in his presentation because the short of time, like the part of constitutional amendment that Kun Pongthep already showed this great presentation. But some point that I also need to add is that even we also have referendum in the process, but referendum is also limited because in this constitutional amendment process we also have the 2 limitations that was stated in the draft constitution. First is the form of state, and the second is the idea of democratic regime with the king as the head of the state. So these 2 parts, even we have the referendum cannot change the 2 broadest sense of this, and we will say that is the constitutional court. The constitutional court will also have the power to reject the draft of constitutional amendment, so they will also have some powerful power in the process to interrupt the constitutional amendment process in the future. And the next point that I would also add is that in the provisional part of the draft constitution, this constitutional draft, Kun Pongthep also add some point that the Senate will also be elected or chosen by the NCPO, but it also have some another serious point that we also have to add, like we also not when the new constitution come, normally the military will gone, but this draft the NCPO will also stay and have the same power as the present in the next maybe 1 year or 1.5 until we have the new government. The power like Article 44, Article 44 that we also heard in this interim constitution will also in the hand of General Prawit. So we cannot sure that what will happen even this draft constitution pass, like that we also not sure that the referendum will happen in the next 2 months. When this draft constitution is passed, Kun Prawit with this power, with the power of Article 44, he can also maybe reject or change his roadmap at any time as they want. This power is also in the provisional part of the constitution, so it may be not good when we think about in the democratic point of view. Another part that Kun Pongthep also said is the role of Senate. Senate that will be elected from the NCPO will be chosen from the NCPO, and this Senate will have term for 5 years. He will also have the power to interrupt or to attend in the constitutional amendment process. So what this will be mean, it mean that if the Senate that the NCPO was chosen did not allow to change or to amend the constitution, this constitution cannot be amended for next 5 years. And the Senate can also choose the constitutional court or independent organization, which means that the provisional part will not last only 5 years, but when they choose the constitutional court, and the constitutional court will have maybe 9 years for each judge or 9 years. So the provisional part will extend their life more than 5 years. So the people that we think that NCPO will go, NCPO will choose some people in the Senate for next 5 years. Maybe in this 5 years, he will choose some people in the constitutional court. So the idea that the same group of the people maybe last for 10 years or more than that. Another point that I would like to add is the election system that Dr. Jade has explained us for some details and said that in some country also use this system. He said about the Mexico, Denmark, and Baden-Württemberg in Germany. But in detail, I think Baden-Württemberg is also different. But he said that some country use this system, but another country did not do it. Why is that? In Germany, we also maybe know we have in Germany have 16 states. Only one from 16 use it. Or around the world, we have more than 100. Only 2 or 3 that can be named use this system. Maybe this system has some problem. Another system is better than this. Also, Germany have another system that he also said, the system that we use in the last draft from Ajahn Bawansak. It's better than this draft in many points. I would like to add some point like that. People can use to vote to split their vote about the party and the candidate that they want to use. If this draft from Dr. Jade already explained that be used, so the people cannot split their vote. They have to use it together. When I want to choose someone, but I hate this party, so I have to choose it. Or I want to choose this party, but I hate this person, this candidate. I cannot have the alternative choice. This is the first problem. Another problem is this system is bad for the, how can we say, a minor party, a party which don't have enough money or enough power to send every candidate in every constituency, because this system needs to get the point from every constituency. When the party cannot send the candidate in this constituency, they cannot gain the power. They cannot gain the vote from the people. This is another problem. And this system that Dr. Jade has used at Mexico, used Denmark, was used in South Korea before. I also researched some part, and South Korea, the Constitutional Court of South Korea said that this system was unconstitutional. It's contradict to the idea of free and fair election. And now South Korea turned from this system to the normal German system. So when the statistics show that only some part of the country use this system, it maybe mean that it has also a lot of problem, a lot of trouble in the system.
Pongthep, thank you for that. I just want to bring it back to the panel a little bit and ask you, the panel as a whole, a very simple question. Ajahn Jade has told us about the Constitutional Court, the need to interpret this law. The question I'd like to ask is, why are Thai constitutions so unbelievably complicated? You are in the top 10 consistently for length and complexity of constitutions. They don't work. You go back to 2006, you remember the constitutional crisis with precipitated by the election, which people didn't participate in, and actually nobody knew what on earth was going on. So what is the problem inside the Thai system that makes them produce these immensely complicated, defective constitutions over and over again.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure how many constitutions have you read in this world. And when you say complex in the Thai constitution, I'm not so sure how many constitutions provisions that you've read through and you say the Thai constitution provisions is complex. Have you read the German constitution? Have you read many other European constitution? If you read the US Constitution, which is fairly short and the shortest in the world, do you think it's not complex? And what do you mean by complexity? I think that's questionable and that's arguable. If you read already about 100 up constitutions and you can make clear what the provision said and what they meant, then I would agree with you that the Thai constitution is complex. If you can tell me what the complexity means. But if you can't, I don't think you can say that Thai constitution is very complex as compared to other constitutions around the world. The length, I may accept that it's long. It might not even be one of the 10th longest because this draft is about 40 some thousand words. The longest will be about 150,000 words or more.
Whose is that?
Or less. Okay. So if we put together all the constitution around the world and you say the Thai constitution is so long and so complex, you have to also think what has happened in this country. And when you write the constitution short, people ask for that and this and this and that and that and this and this and that and that and this to be added in the constitution. If you think the people should have their words in the constitution, are you going to tell the people, let some of us here walk around the country like those drafters who walk around the country, listening to people who ask you, why don't you write this? Why don't you write that? Why don't you put this? Why don't you put that? Are you going to tell the people, I'm not going to write it because I want the Constitution to be short. I want the interpretation of the Constitution to be broad. And does broad mean vague? Or it means something else? So I think if you make it fair to all the drafters of the Constitution, whichever Constitution in this country, and it gets longer and longer and longer, and you might think that it gets more complex and more complex and more complex. Which Constitution around the world doesn't get more complex when they pass? Which Constitution around the world, when it is again amended and draft, didn't get longer? Every constitution in this whole world, also the United States Constitution, gets longer after amendments, after the change have been made to it. So I don't think the length is that much of a problem. The complexity, it's a constitution, what do you think? The constitution can't be so simple that you can use it easily, but it can't be too hard that no one knows how to use it. So I think that's what the constitution is. Okay. The other 2-3 points that I wanted to make, the gentleman, I think I remember Ajahn Pongthep, right? When you mentioned about the electoral system, why do we have to use the electoral system that every other country in the world use? Why the success will not be here in this country when the success did not happen in any other country? Many of the systems around the world did not gain success elsewhere, but gain success somewhere else. If you think that it doesn't work here, some of you might be shaking your head, some of you might be nodding. Then, do you think that we follow the German system? It works in Germany, it will work here in Thailand? You think we follow the Japanese system? It worked in Japan, it will work in Thailand? Is that true so? So this system, the reason it's called mixed member apportionment, and the reason that I raised Mexico, Denmark, Baden-Württemberg, and I raised the mixed member proportional, is because I said if you want to compare the system like this, I didn't say that MMA is a system used elsewhere. It's perhaps used only in this country, or it might not be used because if the constitution, the draft constitution does not pass through referendum, you won't get to use it. You probably get to use other system. Okay? The last point is that many of the issues, the aspects that both Kun Kasit and Kun Pongthep raised did not have anything to do with the Constitutional Drafting Committee. It has things to do with the NCPO itself. And I think all of us here knows the process of the constitutional drafting. What has happened? Not only this draft, also the Bawansak draft. And when you raise the issue under the provisional part of the Constitution, you know where it's from. Stand up then. Talk to the NCPO, not the CDC. Or become the CDC yourself. And if you become the CDC yourself, as I've been through the process for almost 2 years for the 2 CDCs, I know what happened. Can't talk to you guys. I'm not going to talk to you guys too. What has happened? But let's say if you are part of the drafting committee, you can speak up as you will. You can speak up as you want. And when you say, why all these drafters draft the Constitution like this? Why don't you draft like this and like that? And when someone asks you, what if you are the drafter, how will you do it? You said you will do it like this, you will do it like that. If you are asked to be the drafter, are you going to write it like that? No way. I don't think so. You're not the only one person who will be able to draft it. And when the society is in this kind of situation, I agree totally with Kun Pongthep that the legitimacy of the Constitution being passed through the referendum is through a fair and open process to the referendum. And I think that's what the CPO might be thinking of, or might not have been thinking of. But you should talk to the NCPO. And especially all the provisions that you raised as the problems. You know where it's from. So I'm asking, if any one of us here in this room become a drafting panel, will you write a constitution with no provision? That is a provisional matters. How will you do it?
Okay.
Under the NCPO today. So I think we also have to think through what can we help each other and how can we get this country out of the situation that has been coming to now. And we don't want this to happen again in the future. We have to help each other.
Thank you. Right, questions. Can you identify yourselves, be quick and to the point, and if you want to focus on one of our panelists, name him. Willie.
Right. It's to the 2 party representatives. If I understand you right, the draft constitution renders the elections meaningless. Now, given the restrictions before the referendum, do you think that you will be able to communicate that point of view to the people who are supposed to vote in the referendum?
Did you have anybody in mind? Parties. Okay.
Since the very first day of my presence in the National Reform Steering Assembly, I did ask the President of the Assembly to speak to General Prawit to allow political parties to hold meetings and so on within their premises. And when the second question to the referendum was being introduced to the Assembly about the 250-man Senate, I also requested the Assembly President to speak to the military establishment to allow an open discussion on the contents of the Constitution as well as on the referendum itself, especially the second question. And I have written articles and giving interviews. I even suggested that the Election Commission organize public debates, sort of a town hall meeting or through televisions and radios, and can draw upon the system of many of the European countries, particularly Switzerland, where the two sides, the pro and cons of the constitution, so the referendum question, the second one, could be added and be told to the people, and then for the people to listen to both sides and to make a judgment on the referendum day. But so far, there has been either silence or very negative response from the establishment, including the Election Commission. And I think that's sad. And the referendum law, there are more punishments than the facilitation of the open discussion. And it's another sad history, another sad chapter on the whole, this discussion about the constitution and the referendum. I hope that the Election Commission and the military authorities will allow a more open debate. And I think the majority of the 65 million people would like to give a sort of critical but positive viewpoints on the constitution, on the referendum questions. Only a few people that would like to spoil the show, but you cannot use a rule that covers 65 million people in order to pinpoint at a few tens or 20s and so on. I think it was a wrong approach from the very beginning. I hope that they will reconsider the issue and allow the people to have the more open discussion. Anything that is distortion, it's incitement and so on, there are so many rules and laws existing in the country. You don't need to have another law on referendum and reprimanding the people that you cannot breathe, more or less. Thank you.
Pongthep.
I have nothing to add, but only short that not only political parties which are more restricted than ordinary people, because besides this referendum law, there is an NCPO order which restricted political parties from conducting political activities. So, I mean, if ordinary people right now can hardly voice their opinion or very restricted in voicing their opinion, of course, political parties will be restricted more. Anyway, I share the same view as Kun Kasit and many other people in Thailand, that we would like to see a free flow of opinions up on this draft charter, whether it's good or it's bad or some defects, right? I think it's better for the voters to cast vote during the referendum. And we once request the Election Commission, which is responsible for this referendum law, to amend the referendum law, because even the commissioner themselves accepted that many provisions are ambiguous. The Deputy Prime Minister Wisnu, who is a veteran lawyer, can hardly interpret this law with confidence. So everybody in Thailand except the drafter and some officials appointed by the drafter will be confident in going to say the good parts of the draft charter. But others will be scared, very scared, which is not the atmosphere that should take place during this period of referendum.
Right, question.
Hi, Nopon from Bangkok Post. I have two questions for two speakers on the panel, one for each. First, let me ask Dr. Jade. You said you were one of the drafters on the previous charter that was rejected by the junta people, and you are an advisor to the current one, to the latest one. What made this charter, the latest one, better than the one that you were actually drafting? That's for Dr. Jade. Another question for Kun Kasit. As a former Democrat supporter, I was very heartened to hear what Kun Kasit says about this charter. Very pro-democracy, I mean, from the Democrat people. Is that your personal opinion, or is that the party's opinion? Because before that, we have heard similar comments from Kun Apisit, the party leader, on his criticisms on this charter. But a couple of days ago, there was a senior member of the Democrat Party, and also sitting on the PRC board, who was saying that whatever Kun Apisit said was his personal opinion, not the party resolution yet, because there's still a law that bans the meetings of the parties. Therefore, it's not, whatever the party leader said, is not the party resolution. If it's the party resolution, how would the Democrat, which is the oldest party in this country, trying to influence this opinion to its supporters around the country, given the ban on the campaigning against the charter now? Thank you.
Dr. Jade is also my professor, so he tells me to answer the second question first.
Quickly.
The Democrat Party is still a member of the Liberal International based in London. And I have been on the executive committee of the Liberal International for the past 4 or 5 years. So we still belong to the liberal and democratic family of all the political parties of the 5 continents. We are also member of the councils of Asian Liberals and Democrats, an organization based in Manila. And if you look into the terms of reference or the manifesto of the Democrat Party, we are very much left of center or a liberal political party. So we had to go for a liberal constitution. Of course, some members at the moment would like to get into the election process as soon as possible and would like to be in the coalition government, most probably backed by some of the military personnel and so on. So the debate is still going on inside the Democrat Party informally, of course. We cannot organize a formal one. So at the moment, there are 2 schools of thoughts. One, to compromise the principle of liberal democracy in order to be more pragmatic of getting into the election and join the coalition. The struggle is going on at the moment, but do rest assured that I think the majority still adhere to the liberal principles. Thank you.
For the first question, you gave me a tough question to answer. Well, I answer it simply. One of the better point that I see as compared this current draft to the previous draft is that this current draft still has a chance to become a constitution. But the previous draft has no chance to become a constitution. That's the only better part that I can tell you. Any other parts, I'm not capable of telling you which part of the previous the previous draft constitution is better than this current draft constitution.
Question, please.
Okay. Thank you. I have one simple point to make. The new constitution is potentially...
Can you identify yourself, please? Who are you? Just for the audience.
My name is Tirashet Rorasambat. I'm 16 years old.
You're what? 16 years old. Oh, 16 years old, okay.
All right.
You're forgiven.
So the new constitution is potentially limiting our basic education rights. Previously, they have covered all the way into high school, but the new constitution only provides rights to middle school. So why are they limiting such basic thing as education rights? The reasons they have stated so far isn't so relevant to the whole majority of Thai students. So the basic question is why they are limiting our education rights. Thank you.
Well, I think you're asking me.
Yes.
It's not actually limiting, okay? Because when you look through the previous constitution, especially the 2007 constitution, the 2007 constitution said you are given 12 years of mandatory education, whatever that means. Okay. In this constitution, it said you are given the mandatory education, including the, say it's simple, the kindergarten. But in the upper level, or whatever upper level means, if you don't have the money, then you come get it from the fund. The very bottom line is that if we live in a society in which we have all these other people who are able to pay for education, who are able to pay for public health, their own health, should all these people be together with those who cannot pay and get every single bit of free education as well as free public health out of the tax of those people who cannot pay, as well as those people who strive to work hard? Is that what we call fair? If, let's say, I have children and I can pay for my children, why should I get free education for my children where I can pay for them? Is that a matter of right? And do you think that all the rich should pay as the poor, or all the poor should pay as the rich? Or just all the richest pay, all the poor are given a chance not to pay? Should we be in a society in which those who have more should help those who have less? How much money do we have in this country? How much money can we make? How many tax avoidance in this country? Can we reap all the payment of tax from every single bit of those who were supposed to pay tax? If we can't, we have to find a better system to help. And this, it didn't mean that if all the students going to school in a level of high school, if all of them cannot pay, they will be paid by the government. So it didn't mean that the right has been taken away, but it's only given to those who are in need, because we have to help each other. Otherwise, this country will not become a better country. If you look at some country that they give free education to everyone, free public health, free health care to everyone, how much tax do you think those people pay? You can ask some of our European friend here, some of our American friend here, some of our Australian, New Zealand friend. How much tax they pay in order to get that system? How much tax people in this country pay? On top of that, how much are they willing to pay? I think the willingness to pay tax of the people of this country is very low. So that is the bottom line of the problem.
Okay.
So don't worry, okay?
You will still get
quick
your follow on.
education.
I have to intervene because we introduced 15 years free education when we were in the government a couple of years ago, and then I stand firm with the 15 years of free education. And second, there are more poor people than rich ones. Rich kids can go to the English-speaking school and so on. But even the middle class and so on, why not? I mean, it's the duty of the state to provide free education. I even go with Sanders, Bernie Sanders, even free education for university education. Thank you.
Good. Well, that cues Voice of America. So, Steve Herman.
Hi. Good evening. Steve Herman from the Voice of America. This question is directed to the two representatives of the party who obviously seem sympathetic to having a debate in this society about the draft charter. But some of those who have spoken out just on social media have been detained and face charges of sedition, computer crimes, and who knows what else. I'm wondering if you think that they made a mistake by making those posts on social media, and what you would like to say to other Thais who want to express themselves on social media about the draft charter.
Who would like to answer that question?
I think I have been giving interviews and writing articles, and many of my Democrat parties have been giving opinions and so on, and many other academicians and journalists and so on. It depends on the contents of your right of expression. And so far, I think the majority have not been invited to the attitude adjustment school. Only a few. So one has to compare the contents of all of those messages. Were they distorting, detrimental or not? And I don't think there is a need to be vicious. One can have criticism in a more rational and positive manner. I think that should be the viewpoint. And I think the Human Rights Commission somehow has to come in and have a look at it, whether some of those arrested and so on were being abused with their human rights and so on. We have bodies and other agencies and so on to help protect the people if they are arbitrarily being arrested or punished by the authorities in being. Thank you.
I think right now, from the media that the Thai people perceive, they are worried about using social media on the point of the draft charter. Whether if Ajahn Pongthep send me some good article, and can I say ja? You know, so not just distribute more, right, but even to communicate or anything. So I think this one, I'm pretty sure that many of what's happening now is not illegal, but people are not certain whether that can be done or not. I think it is the responsibility of the Election Commission. At least, if we do not have good law, the application of not good law should be good. Right? The Election Commission, which is responsible to amend the law if it is not good. Right? If it does not do that, at least to clarify what can be done. And I would say that if Kun Mi Chai, as the chairman of the drafting committee, could speak out on this, if he speak out on this, that okay, why I'm campaigning, why I'm telling the Thai population about what I think is good. Others should be able to voice their opinion, which may not be in line with my opinion. But I have never heard anything from Kun Mi Chai. Ajahn Jet, would you please recommend Kun Mi Chai to do this?
Right. Question?
Okay, my name is Tan Ritipan from New Democracy Movement. Ja. No worries, it came from us. I got a few, actually 3 or 4 questions to ask you guys.
Just can you have one or two and make them focused, okay? Because we're running out of time.
I asked him to answer it back and forth so we can wrap up this time, sir. At our knowledge right now, we doesn't have any organization who will monitoring the referendums. Any party right now in concern that the junta will cheating on the referendum like Stasi did in Germany, sir? Because I saw you guys speak a lot about Germany, why don't we speak about Stasi, which is a bit, similar to our junta?
Okay, well that's a clear question. Kun Jade? Who is watching, who's monitoring the referendum? Is it going to be free and fair?
Well, that I have already said. You have to ask the NCPO because it's not under the capacity of the CDC. The drafting committee doesn't have anything to do with the referendum. It's only written the constitution, the draft constitution has nothing to do with the referendum. So I cannot answer that question. Who's watching? I don't know. I don't know who's responsible.
Okay, can we have a few more quickies like that?
Okay. In the Constitution, they mention about the political policy that apply to the bureaucrat, and we have to stand in that policy for the next 20 years, which means right now I'm 20, early 20, and I have to wait until 40s. Oh, come on. 40? Seriously? 20 years, sir? That we have to rely on the policy of the same Constitution. Okay, this year we got iPhone 6 or something already. But did the policy will adapt to the time in the future in that further long, sir? And why can't people decide our own future for our country, sir?
Okay.
Who are you asking?
That probably me. The draft constitution, if you get one day and you read through, it didn't say 20 years national strategy. It just said that you should have the national strategy. It is the law that said so. So if you want to talk about the law now, you have to talk to the National Legal Assembly, because it has nothing to do with the Constitutional Drafting Committee. If the Constitutional Drafting Committee just say that you need to have the strategy, the national strategy. It didn't say that you need to have 20 years. The 20 years come from somewhere else. It's not the drafting committee.
Okay.
No.
What?
Okay,
Sorry. Okay. Just.
I was against it inside the National Reform Steering Assembly, and in my intervention, I said that it is not possible to have a 20-year strategic planning for Thailand. We are not a socialist or a communist party. We are not a one-party country government. And the domestic context and the international context keep on changing. So you cannot have a fixed 20-year strategic planning and so on, assuming that everything remains stable. And second, very important, is that you don't allow political parties, the incoming elected government, to have the flexibility. So in this sense, the strategic program of 20 years for me is unacceptable, and then I put this on record. And I think this is probably have to work on this one also. Thank you.
Okay, if you've got one very brief question, you can have it.
Okay. And this is really brief question because we are campaigning against the referendums that's going to happen for campaigning for vote no right now. So by the limited of freedom of expression that we're facing right now, can we just simply say like, this constitution is suck, just don't vote for it?
Are you talking about a boycott?
No, sir. I'm talking about vote no, sir.
Okay, no comments. Right, can we have a question coming up? I can see a questioner. Can you answer? Come forward.
Chris Bruton, a member of the club. A couple of quick questions, I hope easy ones. Referendums are very complicated things, and our chairman of the meeting has suggested that the subject of this question, this referendum, is a complicated one. Do you think the people of Thailand really understand what they're going to be voting for when they come to the referendum? You know, we're going to have a referendum in Britain about EU, in or out, but many of the people don't really understand that or not at all. Constitution's very complicated. So my first question would be, what percentage do you think of the Thai people really understand what on earth they are voting for or against? Second question, if they vote no, what are the scenarios that you see as being the options that follow that vote? Because a lot of people may feel that they want to vote yes to have an election, but they don't really like the Constitution. But if they vote no, then they have a great void of uncertainty in front of them, which may perpetuate military rule for goodness knows how long. So, first question, how many people really understand what they're talking about when they have a referendum? And secondly, if they vote no, what are the scenarios that we could see for the future of Thailand? Thank you.
Right, that's a complicated question, so I'm going to simplify it. I'd like each of you to answer yes or no whether you think the people understand what they're voting for. So, Jade, do you think they understand, yes or no?
Because I'm delightedly appointed by the CDC to be here, I can't answer that first question. Whether people
All right, you can't answer it. Kun Kasit, do you think people understand what they're voting for, yes or no?
I think it's too early to call. But I think if there will be an open, set of open forums and so on, and the utilization of all the medias and so on, to give people the basic ideas about the content of the Constitution, then I think the majority would
have a better idea.
I do believe in that one, because we did have the referendum in the year 2005. Seven before. Yeah. So people are quite used, and then there has been extensive participatory politics in the past 10 years. So I do not belittle the capacity of the Thai people to understand the basic contents of the Constitution. As to if the referendum were to come out with a no vote, you have to ask General Prawit.
Pongthep, do you think people understand it, yes or no?
What I can say is that people can understand the draft charter if they have a chance. First, if they have a chance to read it. Even if they have a chance to read it, I have to admit that some provisions can be hardly understood. Even the students of Ajahn Pongthep, he read the law, right? They do not understand. They have to ask their teachers to explain to them, right? But the important contents of the draft charter can be explained to the public. Can be explained to the public, but not one-sided. Not one-sided. For example, if the CDC explains, the CDC will explain that a new electoral system is very good. It's very good. Right? But if others are allowed to explain, they may say that it is very bad. I don't know. Maybe Dr. Jade may be right. Others may be wrong, or vice versa. So I think these two sides of information should be allowed to distribute it to the public, and people will decide. People will decide. Will I believe in the system which very few countries in the world use? Or will I believe in the system which we have used for many, many years? For example, the parallel system, which there is no problem with that. There's no problem with that. Right? The Democrats amended it. So all political parties get used to it. They do not reject it. The Thai people get used to it. They have no objection to that. Why did the electoral system have to be changed? So I think if the two sides of information are allowed to voice to the public, then people will clearly understand and make a proper decision.
And just to follow on, if it doesn't go through, what would you predict? If the referendum fails, what would you predict?
We have to trust General Prawit this time. He said that we will have election in July next year, right? Right? We have to trust him. Don't you?
Right. George, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, just a quick one for Kasit. I mean, you've obviously been quite critical of the process right now. When I heard you here speak previously, after you joined with SUTEP, you were very supportive of the NCPO and the constitutional process, and then prior to that, you were very critical of it. So I guess my first question is, I mean, what's your relationship with SUTEP, given that you know, he's obviously on the opposite side of the spectrum from you on the Constitution. And secondly, you know, is there a reason that your views on the NCPO and the Constitution appear to be, you know, so flexible, changing? Thank you.
I think let me explain. I was out of work. I was not in the National Reform Steering Assembly. That came much later. And I did make a paper on the reform of the Democrat Party and submitted to Kun Apisit. And I think there is a sort of a agreement in principle, but there is no subsequent discussion and implementation. So I told Kun Apisit that in that sense, and then I will be doing something else. Okay, so I wanted to work on the reform of the Democrat Party, but that it was not available. Then Kun Suthep called and invited. He was in his last day in the monkhood. Tomorrow, the next day, he had to go to the court for the incidents at Lumpini and so on. So he said that he will leave the monkhood and will run the foundation. Would I come and help him to do the reform work on behalf of the foundation, as well as to do some of the social activities? Then I said yes, because I had nothing to do at the Democrat Party and out of work from the parliament because of the coup d'etat and so on. Then I was there for a couple of days. Then the draft constitution of Dr. Bawonsak came into the public eyes, and the foundation of Kun Suthep did invite Kun Bawonsak to explain the contents and so on. And I was against it from the very beginning, especially a Politburo-like committee to oversee the parliament and the cabinet and the elected bodies and so on. And the disagreement between I and Kun Suthep came on this issue. Then we have another 2-3 days of discussion, which we disagreed on the contents of that first the constitution, draft constitution by Dr. Bawonsak. So I left the foundation. I resigned. I submitted a memo that we had fundamental differences on the contents of the draft constitution. On the day that Kun Suthep went to, I think, Intercontinental Hotel to announce his support for the draft constitution. So I left. And I think a few weeks later, I became a member of this National Reform Steering Assembly from the request of the military authorities to Kun Apisit. And Kun Apisit submitted my name, and I was somehow opted into that one. But I still meet Kun Suthep every now and then as a personal friend. But I had nothing to do with the constitution, with the foundation.
Good.
Okay?
Umesh.
So that's clear on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Umesh from Bangkok Post and a board member of the FCCT. I have two questions, if I can ask. One is directed to Kun Jae, the other one to Kun Kasit. The first question that I'm going to direct is to Kun Jae. If I was one of the advisors, or if I was one of the CDC members, and if I did not agree, or if I was being pushed by the NCPO to do anything that was against my will, because you're supposed to be free, I would quit, I would go out and say, this is what is happening. Why did members of the CDC not do that? If you can answer in an elaborate way on that issue. Second is to Kun Kasit. I know Puea Thai stand and the red shirt stand is purely to say no. Kun Kasit, you are kind of saying no, but your Suthep and his gang is saying yes. PAD is kind of split, depends on who you talk to. With 10 odd million votes in your favor and 13 or 15 million with Puea Thai, if you both unite, there is a 100% possibility that the charter will fail. But you are the Wednesday child here, if I can ask. How do you plan to tackle that issue? Thank you.
Well, the question that you asked me, I think the previous CDC member some of the previous CDC member and some of this current CDC member actually did make their voice heard, that they disagree with what the NCPO proposals were, or given what the public saw. Okay. Working as a group, if you have a spirit of working as a group, though you disagree with some of the point, it is too personal to cut short that you disagree with some of the point and then you walk away from the working panel. You might shake your head on me, okay? But if you are working as such and you understand the condition of this country, then you might have to think twice. If you are a person who is very in a self-esteem and have your own very nice ego, you might be doing that. But if you can lower your self-esteem and you understand what is egoist is to be useful, then you will understand why some people even disagree, they still work. And why even they said they disagree, somehow they still work. It's not easy to explain. But you find those people, they disagree. And you all probably heard that I was saying out of the panel when I was the CDC member, Kun Bawansa was heading, that all the 5 rivers should be banned from politics for 2 years, right? I was the only person. But when everybody disagreed, I said, fine. Isn't that also democracy? I work with the people. It's not only the CDC member, 36 of the CDC member at that time. It's the NCPO, the cabinet, okay, the National Legal Assembly, as well as the National Reform Council, as the CDC. Everybody disagree with me. How many people are there? 500 something. But I still maintain my work and I still work. If you ask me today, do I still retain to that proposal that I made? Yes, of course. And that's part of the reason that you can see why people are still working and why people still make their voice heard, but they're still working. So that's why, that's the reason.
I think if we were to come to with the final decision on the constitution, it would be based on the fact that it is illiberal and it is not progressing from the point of the 1997 and the 2007 constitution. That I think should be the basis for the final decision of the Democrat Party or Kun Aphisit in that sense. And second is that I think General Prayut still owns to all of us. What would happen if the people reject the constitution? He has to come out with an answer. Okay. As to the Puea Thai or the Red Shirts' rejection of the constitution, I think I have to leave that to Kun Pongthep or to Kun Jatuporn and so on. But I think it would be from a different reasoning or altogether from the position of the Democrat Party or the leader of Democrat or even myself. Thank you.
Kun Pongthep, do you want to add to that?
Let me add to the first question. I think it's very important. If we were forced to do something against our conscience, what will we do? I think the word which came to my mind is integrity. If we believe in that or not. If we believe that the one which were sent to us by the NCPO are really good, right? Are very good. That's okay, because you truly believe that it is good. But if you do not believe that it is good, or you believe that it is bad, collectively, I mean not only one, as a member of a committee, right? If collectively we said it's very bad, and if we accept it and say it is good, we can hardly claim that we are a person of integrity. I think the point is on this. I don't know what's going on there, so because since I took no part in there. And that's all, right?
Yeah.
You want me to answer that, right?
You can answer whatever you like.
Okay. I forgot the second one.
What was the second one?
The second one was Puea Thai stand basically is against the charter, whereas the Democrats are split. Anutin camp is saying no, Suthep is saying yes, so he and his company are saying.
So, but what's the question? The consequences.
Well, the question was to Kasit,
Not me.
Yeah, but it's an interesting question because I mean, in 2007, the Northeast was very much against the constitution. So the nub of the opposition was up in the Northeast then. Is that going to happen? Is that going to spread this time?
During the time of 2007 referendum, at that time, Thailand Thai Party had an opportunity to go out to the people and explain our opinions against the draft charter. We could print a pamphlet explaining the negative points of that draft charter. So a lot of people in the North and Northeast understood, and that's why people in the North and Northeast, a lot of them voted against the draft charter.
Right. Last question.
Okay, two very brief and practical questions. I'm Jeffrey James. I'm formerly an anchor with CNBC. I work for different parties here in Thailand. There are two simple questions. 5,000 pages. I wonder how long it took all three of you to read the 5,000 pages, the process involved in reading those 5,000 pages, and then the second question is, everyone in this room is beautifully educated and aware of all the issues we're talking about tonight. What about the tuk-tuk drivers? What about the motorbike boys? How do you reach out to them and tell them, guys and girls, these are the issues of the new Thailand. Which way are you going to go?
Not brief questions, but anyway.
Sorry for that.
Enormous.
I think we need another session to talk about the inequalities and the closing of the gaps and so on. But in my intervention inside the National Reform Steering Assembly all along for the past 6 months, I have been against the special economic zones, the mega projects, the tax cut for the well-to-do, and so on. Very much again a sort of the elitist approach to the economic development. And I have been asking for more projects and measures and so on the plight of the ordinary people and the basic provision of the necessities in life, education, hospital, and things like this and so on. But so far I haven't heard about this forthcoming from the Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs, Dr. Somkit. From him it's about the bigger projects and so on, but nothing about the ordinary people. But so far we haven't got the time to discuss this. But do rest assured, whether Kun Pongthep or myself, we are politicians. I think the situation of the ordinary Thai people is very much in our hearts. Thank you.
I think you raised a very important point, how people will understand important points of the draft charter. I would say that media can help, televisions, radio stations. If media speak up, for example, important issues in the constitution, right? Whatever issue it is, for middle school to high school, education, healthcare, electoral system, check and balance system, and then invite both sides to state their views. So people can, today I'm a taxi driver, I can turn on my radio and listen to this point. I will understand more. And then by the time of August 7th, I'll be able to make my decision.
Good, right. Well, we've run over 2 hours. I'd just like to ask one final question. If you go back to 1932, we've had 20 constitutions, and that gives us an average of 4.2 years. That is the world's highest failure rate on constitutions by far. I mean, there are countries that have had more constitutions, but they've gone back 100 years earlier. So Thailand has the highest fail rate. Now, if you go back to 91, if you go back to 2007, the constitutions went through because people said it's better to get it done, be practical, and then later you can fiddle with it and adjust it coming back. So let us assume that in August that is what's going to happen. The Thai people will say, enough of this, let's just get it voted through and deal with the problems down the street. The question I want to ask all three of you is, do you think this is the last constitution that we're going to be looking at?
Let me tell you also that this is the first time after the coup d'etat that we are not going to have a new constitution. And one positive praise must be given to General Prawit. He has instructed the National Reform Steering Assembly to come out with a comprehensive plan for political and civic education along the line of Germany at the end of the Second World War and many other countries that did emerge from authoritarian government. And somehow I have been entrusted to do this work for the past 4 months. And my proposal on a comprehensive plan for Thailand, for the whole kingdom, on civic and political education just being passed by the Political Steering Reform Committee as of today. And we will table it to the plenary of the National Reform Steering Assembly by the end of this month or early June. So this would be for the first time in the Thai political history that we will be doing two things at the same time. One, writing a new set of constitutional law, and second, to introduce civic and political education to the whole kingdom. I would be more than happy to send copies of this, but it's in Thai at the moment, if anyone is interested. I have been speaking to a lot of foundations, the German Stiftung, Asian foundations, all the embassies and so on, that we need help to help us do the curriculum and the training and so on, in order to enhance the knowledge and the change of the mindset of the Thai people away from money politics, patronage system and so on. So some positive things will be coming out. So in that sense, if we could push on the civic and political education, hopefully that this will be, but I cannot say it's the last constitution because it's an illiberal one. We need a drastic amendments anyway. Thank you.
So we need at least one more.
Without a coup d'etat.
Without a coup d'etat. So the argument is you've got to change the culture. Anyway, does anybody else want to answer whether there's going to be another one?
When Leicester City started the season, if you bet £1, right, you would get £500 today. 5,000. Yeah, 5,000. But I'm pretty sure that nobody in this room will bet that this draft charter, if it passes the referendum, will be the last constitution. Not even 1-to-1 or 2-to-1, and nobody would. And especially, I think that is the reason why it may not last that long. First, the process of the drafting. The Thai people do not consider by the process of drafting that it is their own constitution. Unlike during the time of the 2007, which people consider 1997, which people consider is a people constitution, but this one is not. The process is not. Referendum, which is not free and fair, will be another factor, which make public do not have full acceptance of the draft charter, and we cannot foresee the future. I'm pretty sure that if we have the process of drafting a constitution, which is democratic, we may have the last constitution, but I'm pretty afraid of this one, that it can be the last one or not.
Well, to me, I hope that this draft constitution, if it becomes the constitution, or if this draft constitution does not pass through referendum, the next draft constitution, which will become the constitution, will be the last and final constitution of this country, waiting for all the amendments that people in the future would want to make to it. I don't think that this will be possible, because the way in which some people of this country think. And the reason I said some people, because I don't know what people means. When someone say people think that, people think this, people think those, it's most of the time a group of people or one person saying people that, people this, people those. So with this kind of thought, I don't think this will be the last constitution. Though my hope is high, but I don't think that's possible.
Good. Well, I think that's a very interesting note to end on. I'd like to thank Janjade, Kun Kasit and Kun Pongthep for coming here. It's extremely difficult at the FCCT to get a panel together with people on all sides of the argument. We've had huge problems with this, with the yellow-red shirt thing. The FCCT always gets it in the neck and gets accused of being one or the other, which is absolute nonsense. So I think it's very fine that this evening, at this very difficult time in Thai history, you gentlemen have come along here and set a very good example. And we're very grateful. You're welcome to come back. Thank you.